This is Challenging the Narrative, a series that takes a hard look at some of the prevailing mindsets surrounding issues that impact our people of color in Spokane. We examine the facts and the stories behind what has occurred and what needs to be done to shift the narrative in our local community, evolving around civil rights and social justice. Journey with us, talk with us, change with us as we challenge the narratives.
Well, I am very thankful for having you here with me today, Adam. And you and I actually had plans to meet before anything had happened. And it was just a matter of scheduling it and getting it on the books. And I'm so happy that we were able to meet each other and have conversation and really talk honestly about what's going on, not only in the schools, but what's going on in Spokane. And with challenging the narrative, that's the whole thing. It's to really come and have community leaders such as yourself sit down with NAACP and really talk about what's going on, not only in the community, but challenging the narrative of what's going on, even in your systems. So we have questions, and we're going to ask those of you, and just let's have conversation. And Jamie and I, the vice president, will get into it. So first, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. So again, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. And my name's Adam Swinyard. I'm the superintendent of Spokane Public Schools. I'm coming in on the end of my 4th year, so it goes fast. Yeah. And just really appreciate the opportunity to connect with you both and to talk. I love Spokane and I believe in Spokane, and just so appreciate any opportunity to come together through community and relationships and talk about how we can be the best Spokane possible.
Thank you. So just to kind of give the audience a little bit of background on what got us here today, we had an incident that happened in our community with Wilson Elementary. And for those who don't know, there was some kind of appalling flyer that went out that suggested that 4th and 5th graders would dress as hobos and slaves for a rehab jazz presentation. And parents in the community saw this flyer and immediately went into action. Immediately, I was very, very pleased that your team reached out to me and said, we're on it.
Yeah.
They were on it quick on, the response and reaching out to NAACP before NAACP could even get to, the situation. Your team was reaching out to me, and I appreciate that. And that was really kind of what we talked about in our first meeting of what happened with the Wilson incident. And in that meeting, you suggested, coming to our next general meeting, NAACP general meeting, which we had heard cries from the community. I was having text messages, phone calls, emails, Facebook messages on the community really wanting to talk about what happened. And so we had originally planned to do a Women's History Month. And so because we heard the cries of the community, said, you know what, we're going to do a town hall and we're going to discuss this. And we told you, we're having this town hall coming up. And you said, I want to be there. Allow me to be there. I want to be there. I believe in that moment also, because our general meetings are already set, well in advance. And I believe at the same time, the school board meeting was set.
We did,
well in advance as well. So the timing wasn't there, but I was very intentional in not wanting you to be there because I wanted there to be transparent conversation with the community and allowing them to air their grievances, but also it's more than SPS. It's the community. And so it's not about talking about, oh, this is just what happened with SPS. This was an incident, but we have incidents that are happening in the school districts around us as well. So this is a town hall to talk about what's going on in our schools. How can we help with our families and our teachers and our students of color? So it's beyond just Spokane Public Schools. So I really want the community to know that town hall was specifically on school systems, not on Spokane Public Schools. So thank you for your willingness to come to the town hall, but even your willingness to be here today. So by now you've seen that town hall.
Yeah.
So I guess, what are your feelings based on the town hall, watching it? And was there anything that you've learned from the town hall?
Yeah, well, the incidences like what happened at Wilson, whether it's in our schools or posters being posted downtown, or the women's basketball team being harmed of a month or so ago. It's heartbreaking. It's literally heartbreaking to see members of our community be hurt in that way. And on top of the historical harm that has occurred, to see harm continue, for it to be 2024 and to still see people hurt, it's heartbreaking. When things happen in Spokane Public Schools, it makes me particularly sad, and it makes me angry, makes me furious.
Yeah.
When an adult makes a choice that hurts kids or staff or families, it makes me furious. And it makes me want to do everything possible so it doesn't happen again. In watching it, I also reiterated to me, it's really important for us to be in community together and in relationships and create space where we can talk about what's happening, for people to feel like they can be heard and their experiences can be shared. It also reiterated to me how important it is that we're operating as much as we possibly can off the same information, because I saw a lot of people come to that space with a lot of hurt and a lot of frustration, and then some of the information that was shared, added to that frustration. Like for example, when someone said, well, there's some teachers at Shadle Park and they said the N-word and nothing happened to them. Well, I can see nothing happening would be infuriating. Now, that wasn't the case, and quite the exact opposite happened. Those two individuals never worked for Spokane Public Schools in a classroom again. And so I think, creating spaces where people can be heard, us being in community through relationships, like when you and I were able to sit down one-on-one, and the three of us have sat down, it makes me hopeful that there's people that care and through relationships and community want to talk about how do we move forward and how do we do better. And I think a part of that's being heard, and also a part is, to the greatest extent possible, how can we operate off the same information? Because when things are shared that are not accurate, then that can just ignite even more frustration and even more concern. And I appreciate you acknowledging that I offered to come, because in watching it, you could tell people are like, well, where's the superintendent? Does he not care? And that was adding to the anger and frustration, when in reality, I had offered, like you said, I offered numerous times, and understood and appreciated your rationale at the time. So I think there's a lot for us all to learn from these moments, both how can we prevent them, but then also how can we come together and unite when they do happen, so that we can have the strongest, most powerful coalition possible when something happens, so we can respond together.
Absolutely. And I appreciated the conversation that we had. And I want the community to know that that town hall was probably one of the best town halls at NAACP meetings that we have had in a very long time, because there was authenticity, there was transparency, and people really got out things that they may have been harboring or holding in for years. And that's what we want. NAACP, we want to be that safe space for people to come in and tell their frustrations, good, bad, or ugly and indifferent, let it out, so that we can start the healing process and get to the solutions.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that perspective, and something that I believe and I feel like I've learned and then continue to learn in watching the town hall is we need to create lots of different types of spaces.
Yes.
If there's just one space and we expect, well, everyone's going to go share their truth in this one space, that doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
And so we need to create lots of spaces, both inside systems and outside of systems, for people to just make the decision that's best for them of where they feel comfortable being heard. And sometimes that's really informal, and sometimes there are really formal events. And so appreciate the work that's being done to create those for our community.
Are you saying that's something that Spokane Public Schools would be willing to commit to doing?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things Lisa and I have talked about, is doing some joint listening sessions next year. And in fact, we're going to start, we've done listening sessions before, but they've been more like episodic, where it's like, well, we better go do some listening because, there feels like there's some tension, or, oh, something happens, so we better go do some listening. And what we're hoping moving forward through our Department of Family and Community Engagement is to have regular scheduled listening sessions, so people could go and look at our website and they could see them calendared for the whole year. And our intent is to do those both by geography, do them by student service, so like families with students with special needs, or families that are receiving multilingual services, but also do listening through community partners, through organizations like the NAACP, and then listening together. I think there's, of course, there's value for there to be all sorts of spaces, and I think there's power when we listen together at the same time.
I agree. That's one of the things that I love about this opportunity today, is challenging the narrative is actually about building bridges in those spaces where we have maybe failed to see each other or to listen with the intent to understand. And so I know that there are a lot of things concerning policies and procedures, and Spokane and you and your team have done a lot of work. You've done a lot of work to ensure that there is equity in our schools, and that with that, we are having the conversations, the hard conversations that need to be had. So with the policies that are there, like policies are definitely the rules, or the way we want to do things. But the procedure is the execution of the policy. And so I think whenever a lot of people are hearing and seeing and reading, we have an equity resolution, and they can see what the policy is, there's some confusion about, well, how is this executed? What's the procedure? Like you brought up the teachers that were fired, or there were some people that were like, well, we didn't know that. Because there is not really that statement on how the procedures are executed. Would you like to kind of elaborate more on that, like policy and procedure and how it is executed?
Well, I appreciate your acknowledgement that there has been a lot of work, and a lot has been invested over the last 4 years. And in fact, we won a national award this year. We were one of 6 districts in the country that was honored by the largest national publication that kind of works in the K-12 space. And the category we won for was equity and inclusion. So we're getting national attention that we've done a lot of work. And there's a lot more to be done. There's a lot more to be done. And so you're right. The policy that's like the rule, setting the expectation, the acknowledgement of a problem that could happen, and then having a rule in place to ensure that it doesn't. The policy also establishes legal parameters to hold people accountable. And so the policy is really important. The procedure is the training people to be aware and to help them grow so they don't make a mistake, but then also have the mechanisms in place that when a mistake is made, then there's accountability to that. And I loved what you told me the other day around, acknowledge, and then accountability and action. And so you have to have all 3 of those. I loved how you mentioned that. And so the procedure is, so then what's going to happen, and how is it going to be dealt with? And so we want to train people, but we also know that people make mistakes. And we have 6,000 employees. And unfortunately, of those 6,000 employees, some of them violate our policies and procedures. And that's why school districts have HR departments. That's why businesses have HR. That's why the city has an HR department, is because we know people aren't perfect. And sometimes people make mistakes. And then sometimes, unfortunately, they choose to not follow a policy. That's the thing too. And we're not going to stand for that. And so the procedure then equips us to do that. And in terms of your question of like, the individuals at Shadle, and then, well, people don't hear about it.
Mhm.
And I that is not uncommon that people are like, well, what happened?
Yeah.
What like we want to know more. And I totally get that. And we should keep thinking about and talking about what we're sharing and how we're sharing it. And we drafted an equity report that we're going to release at the end of May, and it's 85 pages. I shared a copy with you too to help people to provide a window into how are these policies being implemented. So there is an equity policy. So how is it being implemented?
Mhm.
And it's 85 pages from curriculum to workforce diversity to training to special education. It's
Yeah.
pretty comprehensive. But I still get that frustration of why aren't we going to hear? And one of the main reasons for that is if we share too much, then it creates a loophole, and then we're not able to hold the person accountable. And then we have lawyers that step in, and then they're like, so that's a hard balance. And I hear that frustration. We're like, well, we want to know exactly what happened and how those people were held accountable. And we're not always able to do that, which creates frustration. And so I think continue to talk about, well, what are ways that you can without creating a loophole? Because I know the community definitely doesn't not want to see people held accountable.
Right.
And so, what does that look like? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and especially when it comes to like racial slurs and things like that,
Yeah.
they especially want to know
Yeah.
what is being done.
Yeah.
Because they understand that, yeah, you got this policy here, but if it is reported that a teacher or a student is using that, then they're like, well, what do I have? What can I do? And what will happen? What's the follow through with that? So especially in regard to like racial slurs that happen in the schools, like the procedure, what can the community expect?
Well, we have, two procedures that are probably most relevant is we have a non-discrimination policy, and it very clearly states how to make a complaint. It also clearly states how much time the district has to respond, and that we have to respond in writing to the complaint. So I think that's an example of that. Our harassment, intimidation, and bullying, we call it HIB. Jamie and I call it HIB, but these education acronyms, and so in the HIB procedure, it's very specific. So when a HIB report is filed, and there's an actual form that people can fill out, and how many days we have to acknowledge the receipt of the report, how many days we have to conduct an investigation, how many days we have to get back to the parent, letting them know what the corrective action is. Again, whether it's staff or student, we always want to share as much as we possibly can. There's been some situations where we've shared and then we've paid the legal ramifications, because sometimes we also then get sued by the employee downstream because, well, now you've caused us damages. And then that's money fighting litigation that could have gone into students and programs like yours, right? And so there's definitely some complexities of how much is shared. But in terms of those procedures, they're pretty clear and prescribed of what's expected of the district. And I think we can always do more, and we should be asking people, hey, first, have you heard of it? Are you aware of it?
Right.
And also, is it clear? We've done some revising of it to try to, it used to just be pages and pages, and we've tried to streamline it down and make it clearer. I think one of the worries that I have when I drive to work is what's not being reported.
Right.
What's not being reported. And so how can we continue to make it as safe as possible for people to report when they're harmed or someone they know is harmed? And we've tried to add some things to make progress. Like we've added a platform called Let's Talk. You can text it, you can call it, you can email it, you can be anonymous, you can not be anonymous. Just trying to create as many avenues possible where people feel like they can report. We also had an ask in the community about 5 or 6 years ago to create a Department of Family and Community Engagement, because the community was asking for a department that was specifically designed to engage with the community and advocate for families inside of the system. There's always been advocates in the community, and for example, Team Child's been on our community for a long time advocating for youth. And so there's the role of external partners like Team Child, but also that was an example of the community asking, hey, can there be a department so that families feel like they have someone to go to that can advocate on their behalf if they're feeling like something's not being followed up on.
Right. And I was going to ask about HIB, and I'm glad that you went ahead and just jumped right in, because there are so many acronyms in education.
There's so many acronyms.
So many. And it's good that we allow those opportunities for our parents and our community members to be educated around those acronyms, because those acronyms have meaning and they carry weight. And they need to know that there are measures in place for them. And you talked about, creating this department. How else are you expanding on that with HIB and equity, and how else are we expanding Spokane Public Schools? Are you expanding like your reach as far as like we need to do more with training, we need to do more with getting our community involved?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we have done a lot, and we do have that 85-page report, and I think all three of us sit here knowing that there's going to be harm. Like we still have work we've got to do. We've got to do it as fast as we possibly can. And so I think examples, training is a good one. There was something brought up, that training's optional for SPS teachers. It's not optional. If they don't go, they don't get paid. We have professional learning improvement days. 6 hours of those days was devoted to that. But there needs to be more. I think we need to keep having conversations around making sure that it's never a check the box.
Okay.
And I think there's two parts of making sure it's not a check the box. One part is knowing that we're gonna provide you information, we're gonna train you. And if you don't use the information and the learning we've provided you, there's going to be accountability, kind of back to that policy piece.
Yes.
And so I think there has to be accountability to the content. And then also the experience needs to be from credible messengers, and it needs to be content that is going to help move people along the continuum of their beliefs and values. And I think one of the things about our community is our schools are a microcosm of our community. Yeah. And this is a very divisive time in our community. And we're seeing that. Yeah. And I know you told me the other day, you're like, boy, I'll tell you what, the emails that you're getting are nothing compared to the emails that I get. And I was like, and so that spills into our schools. Because our employees live in our community, are from our community. Our kids are from the community. And so our schools become this reflection of what's going out in the broader context. And so, if at the home, things are being said that are discriminatory and racist, then that spills in to schools. Right. If kids are on social media and that type of behavior is being encouraged or normalized, then that's going to spill into our schools. So I think we need to keep talking about the training piece. I know I want to keep learning from national research. There's lots of research being done around DEI training right now, how to do it in the most impactful way. There is definitely a way that will take you backwards, and there's a way that can take you forwards.
Absolutely.
And so what does that look like? And then also, how many hours of training does someone need before they should be expected not to make those types of mistakes?
Well,
and I think that's,
say, like,
and I don't know,
learning journey.
I think that's the thing. I'm not sure there is an exact number.
I don't think.
But I hear that sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a number that would be adequate. Yeah. For that. Yeah. Because life is a learning journey. There are so many things that we will continue to learn, every day. Yeah. And so when we put a number on it, it does become a box that is checked. So would you say even offering it, not with a number attached, but just something that is consistent?
Yeah. I think consistency is really important. I also think that it's important to have space where we're focused specifically on that. And Nicole Jenkins Ronisson-Krantz is our Director of Community Partnerships and Diversity Training. And we're wanting to keep evolving. Prior to our current model, we were partnering with the State Teachers Union and the University of Washington, our locals teachers union. And it was teachers talking and staff talking to staff, staff talking to staff. And we committed to 6 hours of that. We ended up doing 9 hours of it. And I think that was good and valuable. Staff talking to staff. I think that was good.
Right.
But as we're moving forward,
Mhm.
I think the principal needs to play a role in that. The principal, not just sitting, being a participant, but up leading and setting the expectation and talking about their journey and their growth and how important it is to them. So I think our training will continue to evolve. The UW model it didn't have a Spokane context. And so I think that's some of the interest is to make sure it's very specific to our community and some of our challenges. Yeah.
Yes.
And so I think those pieces are going to be important. The last thing I would say really quickly is if we think growth and setting expectations around equity is only going to happen in an equity training, I think we're going to be disappointed.
Yes.
I think it has to be in everything that we do. It has to be the leaders that we hire. It has to be the staff. When we're hiring staff, we should be looking through that lens. If there's a training on science, we should be thinking through that lens. If it's on student behavior, it should be through that lens. It shouldn't be a thing we do at a place. It should be a way that we live. And some districts and some organizations, they'll have like a role that they're like, the district's, equity, director of equity. And I think we and our team have always felt like we all like that's everybody's work.
I agree with that. I know that you've had some hard conversations with teachers and staff who have participated in the harm that has happened to students and families. There's that accountability piece that I keep coming back to because I don't want to disregard any of the work that we've done, that you've done. But I'm also thinking about what you said in the very beginning. It's 2024.
Yeah.
Why is this happening? Wilson, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And so with that, we have that accountability piece. So how are we able to produce in our buildings a culture of accountability to where you're holding like the bad actors as we would kind of say accountable. And then how do we as a community come together and look at SPS and say, how are you gonna navigate this?
Yeah, well, I think that unfortunately, training is only going to take us so far. And I wish that we could sit here and be like, there's a training. And if we do that training,
there's no magic bullet.
And I know, I know, like when we met the first time, Lisa, you're just like, you acknowledge that unfortunately, these incidences, our ability to say prevent them and just say they're never going to happen ever again, that is probably not a reality. So how can we create a school district where we're doing everything we possibly can that they don't happen, that people are operating with cultural mindfulness and a sense of cultural responsiveness, that they are more aware that they share spaces with others, and that their actions can cause harm. Like how can we keep chasing after that and do everything we possibly can? Unfortunately, there's going to be some individuals that either make a mistake or they choose not to. And when that happens, then we need to follow our policies and our procedures, and we need to hold them accountable. And I think we're doing that. I think there's always room for improvement in all ways, in all things. There's always room for improvement. I also think that, there's a lot of staff that are really leaning into this.
Yes,
and they are trying to grow and do better and be better. I kind of think, you have a group of people that are like, they have moved along the continuum. You got a group of people trying. You got a group of people that are kind of over here. They're like, well, maybe.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately, you got some people over here, and they have to be addressed. And so I do think that holding people accountable is going to be part of what moves us forward. And I don't want to say that to like create to not insinuate that training isn't going to move us forward, because I do think training is really important. But just like when you drive down the road, most people slow down, not because there's a speed limit sign. They slow down because they know they might get a ticket. And so I do think that accountability plays a role in raising our consciousness.
Yes.
To this is important. And if I don't take this really seriously, and if I'm not aware of it, then there could be some really negative ramifications for me. And so I think that how we do that and how we talk about it, and how we create spaces, and how we also acknowledge that there are people that are really trying hard, and it might have just been a mistake, and how to work through the mistakes versus the reckless disregard. And I think reckless disregard is different than a mistake.
Yeah, a lot of what you're hearing, or what we're hearing even from the community. You mentioned about, I love the idea where you were saying get principals involved and let them lead some of that training and things like that. Be part of those conversations, because I do think that they are responsible for the cultures in their building.
Absolutely.
So we have incidents like what happened at Wilson or what happened at Shadle, and we see teachers are being held accountable. How are we holding principals accountable?
Well, the principal is no longer working at Wilson. There'll be a new principal at Wilson Elementary next year. And I think that our principals play a really critical role. It is a hard job to be a principal. It's a hard job to be a teacher. It's hard to work in schools. It's hard work there, and there's lots of hard jobs in our community. It's not just educators that are doing the hard work. And I think it begins with hiring great people that have the right heart. And then doing everything you can to train the workforce that you have, and making sure people are clear about the expectations, and when they don't meet it, then holding them accountable, either helping them grow or helping them leave. And those are two things that are both realities. And I would say, over the last 15 to 20 years, things have not been addressed to the level of accountability that I think the three of us have a shared value and expectation. And I know that our school board, their expectation and the policies that they have set and the standard that they have set is a different level of accountability than we had 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 20 years ago. And I think it's going to take some time to build trust, because I see and I feel a lot of broken trust, and I get it.
Yes.
Because when you see things happen and things getting swept under the rug,
right. And
I got some things that have happened in our community that I feel like have been swept under the rug. I'm furious. And it makes me irate.
Yes.
And so in who I am and my lived experience, I can't even fathom how frustrating and upset other members of our communities who have had a different lived experience than me, how they might feel when they things swept under the rug. And
absolutely,
these systems are designed to not change,
right?
And they're designed to protect themselves,
right?
And I know in the work that all three of us do, we've both seen that when you try to change systems,
Mhm.
they revive, they revolt, they result. And it's astonishing how aggressive these systems can be when they don't want to change. And so it takes a strong coalition and relationships and community to do that work.
I think it was important what you said too about you've got all these different groups of people that work there
Mhm.
and that they're all in one space.
Yeah.
And it's easy to identify the ones who are like, let's go. I'm here for it. Let's go.
Mhm.
How are we retaining those people? What are we doing to keep them in that space?
Mhm. Well, I think we have to support them and encourage them and take care of them. And I know that can be really draining work. I know that I hear from our staff of color who feel exhausted at times for the things that they're navigating.
Mhm.
I am encouraged, and I think, you know, I like data. You know, I like data.
I know.
And so I am encouraged, you know, when I look at our attrition data, that, you know, our attrition rates are lower than the national averages, and our attrition rate of staff of color are the same as white staff. So that encourages me that we are maybe moving in the right direction. But we also want to start some listening sessions with our staff and to hear them. But again, we need different types of spaces, because I know when I walk into a room, not everybody is super comfortable just saying what they think. Some people are really comfortable telling what they think, and some people are not so comfortable.
Right at me when you said that. Yeah.
You need that though. You
do
can't
need
survive
that.
as a leader unless you have people that
Absolutely.
are speaking truth into your life.
Absolutely. You have to have that. You have to have people
Yeah.
around you who can be transparent.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And speaking of balance and expression, so we're going to go into that a little bit. Because
okay,
we
yeah.
have a lot of our community that are very expressive,
Yeah.
and they lean on that the rights, the freedom of expression.
Yeah.
And that's a big one that we hear all the time.
Yeah.
It's the freedom of expression. How do we balance, though,
Yeah.
that fine line of freedom of expression versus the harm of expressing to those who are impacted? How do we balance that?
Yeah. Well, I would say first and foremost, our policies are really clear that there won't be discriminatory language, there won't be racial slurs or epithets. Those things are clear. We do get that put out there regularly that it's our First Amendment right. That actually goes back to the early 70s. There was a court case, the Tinker Supreme Court case ruling, and it came from a group of students who were wearing wristbands protesting the Vietnam War. And the school said, oh, you're out of here. You can't be here. And so went all the way to the Supreme Court. And ultimately what the Supreme Court ruled, and it's stayed pretty consistent, is that expression has to create a substantial disruption to the educational process. And so students don't shed their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse door. Staff have similar rights, but you know, there's some nuances to it. And so that's the filter that we use is this creating a substantial disruption to the educational process? And so we hold a pretty high bar to that, to say, you know, what you're wearing or how you're expressing yourself, it might not be a racial slur epithet, but it is creating a substantial disruption at your school. Therefore, it's going to be prohibited. And so that's the legal side that we work to. Unfortunately, I've seen more of that in recent years than I've seen more the last 3 to 4 years than I've seen the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that we could probably spend lots of time talking about some of the whys around that. And I also foresee heading into an election year where it's going to accelerate even more. And it does get complicated when people are expressing certain political candidates or viewpoints.
That's going to be interesting.
And it happens. I mean, as I told you, NAACP, we see that a lot. all the time, and it's their freedoms, and, you know, we're really saying that there's a line of that freedom, you know, when you become intimidating with your language, when you become threatening with your language. Now we're crossing that line. But I really appreciate the conversation that we had today, and what can we expect moving forward?
I think that you can expect we're going to continue to do everything we possibly can to make our schools a place where everyone feels safe, and our students of color feel safe, and they love school. I want every kid to love school, and I want every parent and caregiver, when their kid walks out the door, I want them to be happy and excited for their student to go to school. I don't want them to be worried. I'm a parent too. You know, I don't want our parents to feel worried about what their kids are going to face. And so I think that I know that you can expect that we're going to keep doing this work and want to keep listening and collaborating and being in community and relationship with another, to keep talking about it's 2020. What else? So yes, we've done a lot, and that's great. That's great. And what else?
Yeah.
And then when we do that, you know what else we should then we should say what else? And when we do that, then we should say what else? And just keep asking that and not be satisfied. And I think that's going to take a stronger coalition than ever. If we're coming at each other, and I unfortunately see that from time to time, the parts of the community that don't want to see this work happen, when they see us coming at each other, they start celebrating.
Right.
They are celebrating because now, instead of building the strongest, most powerful coalition possible together, we now fracture ourselves, and our coalition is weaker. And so, but that takes relationships and community and listening and you know, grace and humility. And so that's my hope, is, you know, that I reflect that as the leader of Spokane Public Schools.
Perfect. And it was important to have you here because we want to show that we're building that relationship. And this is the bridge building that we spoke of earlier. And you know, as we start to wind down this conversation, I just, you know, again, getting to know you a little bit. I'm going to ask you a little question.
Okay.
Let's get to know Adam.
Okay.
Let's
Oh
get
boy.
past all of that.
Oh boy, Jamie. Oh boy.
Let's get past all of that stuff, the heavy stuff. But I'm just, you know, let's humanize.
Okay.
You know, and I think that's.
I'm a very boring person though, so I stop with that. I am very boring.
But it's still, we want to make sure that we are, you know, we're humanizing. We're in a relationship. And it shouldn't be just transactional. You know, and it shouldn't just be that an incident happens and we gotta pull Adam and pull Spokane Public Schools to the table. We want to make sure that we have a relationship in NAACP and Spokane Public Schools. So we appreciate you. So 2 questions.
Okay, 2.
First question. Absolute favorite movie.
Oh, wow.
Like you can watch it over and over again. Doesn't matter how many times you've seen it.
Absolute favorite movie. Boy, you're gonna stump me on that one. Well, I love Star Wars.
Okay.
So I am like,
Okay.
Well, I love Star Wars.
Movie
I love, if you're a Star Trek person, I'm sorry. Like, you know, I like when I was little. You like, okay. I like them both. So I like Star Wars.
And will you be participating in any of the expo celebration that's coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be, you know, we've had a really cool partnership, you know, finding ways for our kids to be involved, and we had kids down doing field trips and some more in the coming days. So yeah, I'll be down there checking it out. So that's
cool.
Yeah.
And then I have one last one.
Oh, 3?
I'm gonna make it. Well, I'm just
okay.
choice. You have to choose this or that. We're gonna play a little game. This or that.
Okay.
Balloons Day or Hoop Fest?
Hoop Fest.
Oh, see?
I'm sorry.
That was so
That
fast.
was fast.
Yeah, no question. Yeah.
All right.
Have you played Hoop Fest?
Hoop Fest is like, oh, I played.
Okay.
I don't play anymore, Jamie, because my behavior doesn't meet the expectations. So, yeah. So, you know, I'm too old for that now.
Okay.
But Hoop Fest is like my favorite weekend. Like I love being down there. I love all the community. I like to watch people I know, people I don't know.
Okay.
My boys play. Yeah. No,
But
I've been
have
playing.
you ever done Hoops Day? Ever?
So I grew up here. I
Okay.
started playing Hoop Fest when I was in 3rd grade.
Wow.
I have never ran in Bloomsday.
Oh, that's okay. I'm born and raised in Spokane. I've never ran in.
See?
Bloomsday
Okay.
either, so
You
you-
understand.
Yes.
understand. Yes.
Bloomsday or Hoop Fest.
Listen,
Oh.
I'm a transplant to Spokane.
Oh.
And I've done Bloomsday at least once. And it just happened to be last year.
Well, I always tell people there's 2 things I've never done. I've never been on a ski mountain, not one time. Not because it's cold up there, and that just wasn't my growing up experience. I like to be cold,
You don't like it?
and
Oh,
I've never done Bloomsday. So
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, you know. It's something else that we have in common. I think that the more we have these conversations,
yeah,
the more we are in community with each other,
yeah,
the more that we realize that we
Yeah.
are all humans having a human experience.
yeah, love that.
And human beings do human things.
yes.
They do.
So we can all like rest in knowing that we are going to build this bridge and we're going to move forward together because our community needs to see us
Yeah.
stronger together.
They do.
All right.
Love that.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, thanks, you too.
Thank you.
This is Challenging the Narrative, a series that takes a hard look at some of the prevailing mindsets surrounding issues that impact our people of color in Spokane. We examine the facts and the stories behind what has occurred and what needs to be done to shift the narrative in our local community, evolving around civil rights and social justice. Journey with us, talk with us, change with us as we challenge the narratives.